Right.
Can I just say
Michelle.
one thing really quickly?
Go on,
With tongue in cheek,
Go on,
also a little bit of what you fancy does you good. Because I must admit, if I do a really good show, particularly when I was on Capital and I was a bit famous, it's a hell of a buzz. Yeah. And it's good. It's okay to be excited about that.
It's okay to be excited, sure.
You know, and
I'm excited about coming on men's radio. What are you saying,
we'd like to hear what you have to say.
Are you saying that only Capital gives people that buzz? Because MRS gives me that.
Thank you, Hatti Suvari, top lawyer in the land.
Yeah, but we're talking about mental health, not Boyzone here, for goodness sake. But yeah. It doesn't make me a narcissist because I'd like people to watch this and think I'm a fairly good presenter. I don't think so. If I got on here thinking I'm better than anyone else in the mental health community,
trust me, no one would endorse that.
Different.
We've seen your work.
Right, enough. Time out. Let's get on to this topic.
Sorry,
he sounds like Muttley. Right.
Everybody says that.
Hattie, what's the topic for today?
Cost of living mortgages. What are your rights? So last week, as we all know, the Bank of England raised the interest rates for the 13th time in a row to 5%. It's the highest, actually, as you all probably know, highest rates since 2008. It was very interesting because in real money terms, if you're remortgaging now, you're going to be paying around 61% more for your mortgage than pre-December 21. If your mortgage term has run out and you're remortgaging your property. So there's a few things that I thought would be really helpful for people to know. So I want to talk about what your mortgage lender should do if you're in arrears, top tips when negotiating your mortgage deal or remortgage deal, when and at what point your lender can go to court to force a sale of your property, because that's actually a bit of a murky area. People don't know much about that, and where to get free help and advice if you're having issues with your lender. That's what I thought I'd try and cover today. So I'm going to be as quick as I can because we've got 13 minutes and I'm just aware of that. So yeah, of course, a mortgage is essentially a contract secured on your property. Each lender has their express terms and it's formally legally binding. Mortgage lenders are regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, also referred to as the FCA, who sets down the rules of how lenders need to deal with their customers under the FCA's, and I won't bore you with it, but it's the Mortgage Conduct of Business Rules, also referred to as MCOB. And we have the overriding Law of Property Act 1925, which interestingly was only set up in 1925 to reduce the number of legal estates to 2. So we've got the freehold and we've got the leasehold. That's what that was set up for. So if you are in arrears, the FCA's rules are very strict on what your lender has to do. You can't just be bullied, pushed around, confused, put into a dark place where you feel you've got no choice. Your lender has a duty to treat you fairly, which means they must consider any suggestions that you make to deal with repayment problems or arrears, that you don't just take it for gospel that only your lender can dictate that. Yes, they have to agree that with you, but they must consider what you're proposing. Your lender should only start court action to repossess your home as a last resort if they can show and prove that you've sat down and you've had the conversations and you've shown your affordability and they've said to you that is not acceptable and why it's not acceptable to accept your payment terms. The lender must consider delaying your interest payments to reduce your monthly repayments for a short term, which could help you out. They must consider extending your mortgage term, again, to reduce your monthly payments if they've shot up. And they must also consider to add any arrears onto your total mortgage debt, rather than saying to you, right, for example, you're £3,000 in arrears, unless you pay that in 28 days, we're going to force the sale of your home. We're going to take possession of your home. So these are really important things that your mortgage lender must consider. And the lender has to allow you enough time to sell your property if you cannot come to a payment arrangement with them. My top tip on that is keep a record of all your calls with your lender, who you spoke with, the date and time, and just even if it's a single bullet point, what was said. Because wherever you end up, whether it's in the formal complaint box of your lender, whether it's at court, this is what people are going to need to see. The court will need to see it. Or if you make a formal complaint because your lender did not adhere to these rules, to either the FCA or to your lender's complaints department, they're going to say, well, who did you speak with? When was that? What did you say?
Would I be right in saying, given what you said, that if people are falling into arrears and there's a problem, that it is, for want of a better word, safe to approach the mortgage company or the people you're dealing with a reasonable expectation? You know, they're not monsters. If you approach them with a fair proposition, they can and will. You know, they're not the troll guarding.
They're under a duty to, Neil.
Guarding the bridge. You know, they're not monsters.
Yes, 100%. And if you're ever on the phone to your mortgage lender and somebody comes on the phone who's a little bit unfriendly, although I think those days are long gone, but if that happens, you can say, I'd like to speak to somebody else, please. You should not feel bullied. You should not feel scared. I can understand you can feel worried because of the financial predicament you may be in, but there are very, very strict laws and rules of what a lender has to do. And right now, lots of people are going to feel this interest rate rise this year, next year, and maybe ongoing, because if they do tie into a new rate, as I said, the average mortgage is going up by 61% if you haven't remortgaged since
Is there anything
21.
people can do if they're considering taking on a mortgage to maybe future protect themselves a bit?
There isn't really, to be honest, Neil. I don't know of any insurance policies, unless you've got some form, and I don't know much about insurance at all, but policy that covers your income should you be unwell or out of work. But again, that falls really into insurance, and I'm not quite sure.
That was Keyman Insurance, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was part of it.
I thought Keyman was when you ran your own business.
Yeah.
You're talking about critical illness.
Critical illness is different, but it does link into Keyman. I think Keyman is when you are a one-man band and you run your business, all your income comes from that, and you get the insurance that could possibly cover your outgoings.
But
Keyman. Back in
yeah, they still got Keyman insurance. I'm aware of it.
I used to have all that nonsense back in the day. Now, let's answer this one from Wolverhampton. If you're on a mortgage arrears repayment plan, this will show on your credit file. If this is your last resort and the only affordable option, is there a way to avoid this being recorded? Excellent question from Scott.
To my knowledge, Scotty, there isn't, because the lender has the power on what they record on your credit file. And actually, that's a really good topic. I'm going to do a topic on credit files because there's lots of interesting things to say on that. Yeah, to my knowledge, it is they're up to them on what they want to report and how. But obviously, you know, missed mortgage payments or getting into a payment plan means you're paying less than what you contractually said you would. So I think they can actually go and put that on your credit report. But before any court action is taken, there are, again, apart from the list that I just gave you of what your mortgage lender needs to be able to do, they must also provide you with a list of payments you've missed, details of your total outstanding amount, list out in total the amount of arrears and charges. And the lender must inform you that they're starting a repossession claim against you. And they must also advise you to contact your counsel for homelessness help.
Whoa.
If your lender doesn't do any of that or misses out on a key part of that, you can make a formal written complaint to your lender. Okay, so that's the first place you'd go to say, look, I'm not happy either with the service, either they're missing stuff out, they're not doing things properly. And the response from the lender has to be within 8 weeks. If you're not happy with the response, it doesn't provide you don't feel with a fair, reasonable remedy, or it's not good enough, then you take your argument, your claim or your complaint rather to the financial ombudsman at financial-ombudsman.org.uk.
So if someone's in trouble listening to this or watching the recording of it, what I'm getting from this, it's fair to expect to be treated fairly. It's because it's very easy to panic in situations like this. And what I'm getting from this is there's several steps, and it's not just like suddenly you're on the poorhouse, boom. You know, there's steps and there's things you can do, and the companies have to be reasonable to you. And to be fair, from both points of view, why wouldn't they be? Because if you offer to pay a little bit back of your money or come to an arrangement, ultimately they're going to get their money back. So it's a win-win for them to be reasonable to you. So I'm saying, am I fair to say don't worry too much if you find yourself in this situation?
Well, don't bury your head in the sand, and don't be afraid. And I think you touched on this earlier as well. Don't be afraid of calling your mortgage company directly. I would say I wouldn't really call the broker if you had a broker set up your mortgage. Deal with the lender directly so that communication is clear. You can keep a record of it, and they can act on it directly with you.
I did hear a story once of a lady, and she had all the typical fears. She was in debt to an awful lot of people. She had an awful lot of creditors, and she was, I suppose, putting her head in the sand. She was scared, basically, and it's an understandable.
Well, it's your
reaction.
home. It's
everything,
people,
isn't it?
Yeah.
So what she thought they were going to be. She thought she was going to be dealing with monsters. And she rang them one by one, and she spoke to them directly. She told the truth about the situation, apologised to pay a little bit back when she could, and 100% of them was reasonable and amenable to her requests. So I guess the point I'm making is, don't think you're approaching monsters. You're not.
Two things, 2 points, and Hattie, I'd like your input. Number one, Neil's absolutely right. That was a great comment. Number 3, one. Don't put your head in the sand. It's not going to go away. It's like a bad It's like a bad illness. Trust me, you need to deal with it. 2, do it quicker rather than later.
Yes.
3, you're not dealing with them. You're not dealing with the mafia or a triad or a Maltese gang or something. You're dealing with professionals. They're not going to be as horrible, so don't catastrophize it. It's all part of mental health. That's why I thought this was a great subject. Don't you will find. But the other thing
there will always be a deal to do, provided you can make a contribution. And to add to that, I just want to say, Russ, if you are going to go into a payment plan, do a payment plan that you can afford and stick to, not one that you wish you hope to be able to, because the last thing you want to do is do a deal and then have to go back and say, I can't adhere to that. Go in lower than what you believe you can absolutely afford. Set a time limit. Tell your mortgage lender how you're going to review that time limit. The more you communicate with them, the more honest and upfront you are.
You've hit the 2 key words. You've hit the 2 key words, haven't you? Honesty and communication. Yes. And then it serves everyone, because they want to mitigate.
They'd rather have something.
They'd
rather have nothing.
You took the words right out of my mouth. To have 10% of something is better than 100% of nothing.
I know this is. I've got to put up some of these excellent comments, but the other thing is, Hattie, and it's slightly off topic. It's the same with the inland, not the VAT, because
I know what you're going to say. I had to make a complaint about somebody at the Inland Revenue. They were on the phone to me, behaving so inappropriately, and I was so glad the phone was recorded. But look, there's a couple of things I need to say on this topic.
Quickly, what I was going to say, very quickly, with the Inland Revenue, even they'd rather have something than nothing, and say, this is what I can do.
But I do find them quite aggressive.
Oh yeah,
I have found them quite aggressive, Russ, and I've made complaints, and I have to say the complaints were dealt with really, really well by people who apologise and acknowledged that I was being spoken to in a way which was not acceptable.
Correct.
I asked somebody, I had HMRC, I remember I was on the phone to them a few years ago, and they asked me why I was buying food instead of paying my tax.
Jeez.
They literally said it in those terms.
I like Fortnum and Masons, and I'm not closing my account.
I've never shopped there before. No, but let me just tell you this: early repayment charges. Okay, most people think that early repayment charges, you can't move on it, you can't shift on it. It's when you're coming out of a deal early for whatever reason. You might need to sell your property to get rid of the mortgage so that you can then go and live in another way. Maybe with family, maybe to rent. People think that, can you dispute it? Can you actually say, look, I think that's a bit harsh, it's a bit high, I know I contracted to it, I signed up to it. Actually, the FCA again has very strict rules, and you can dispute and negotiate sometimes with some lenders early repayment charges. So don't assume that what your lender states you have to pay or do is in line with the FCA's rules.
That's key, because they have their own internal company policies.
Yes,
and that might not be
exactly.
The overarching.
And that's a biggie, because some people, in this day and age, it wouldn't. I know I've got a friend who's selling. They won't be able to afford their mortgage once the rates change. They have to sell, move up with their parents, and then perhaps buy again. Early repayment charge, or you lose nothing by trying to negotiate. You lose nothing. You will only gain something if you end up, and you can renegotiate it.
Hattie, I want to just...
There's one more thing I've got to say.
Go ahead.
Please do.
Support for Mortgage Interest Loan, SMI. The government has got a website, okay, just a little bit on this. You might be able to qualify to get a loan, which is only repayable back to the government on a very low interest rate when you sell or transfer the ownership of your property to pay the interest element of your mortgage. Go onto the gov.uk website and just search in the search bar, support for mortgage interest loans.
Brilliant.
You might qualify.
Most important out of all of this, we wish you well.
Sorry, Russ.
Well, I was going to say, most important from Neil and I and everybody watching around the world, we wish you well.
Thank
we wish
you.
you a speedy recovery. Bless you for being brave
I'll leave
enough.
you with a laugh, hopefully. You know that tax inspector that you were talking about?
Yes.
I'll leave you with that thought. What's the similarity between that kind of tax inspector and a stork?
Yay!
I have no idea.
The answer is they can both stick their bills up.
That's a
Bye-bye,
TikTok
everybody.
moment.
See you Friday. Thanks, Hattie. Bye now.
Bye. Thank you, guys.